So today I'm here with John Joe Friedmann. He is the senior software engineer at Givery. Thank you so much for being here, John.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So, John, can you introduce yourself and tell the audience what you do at Givery?
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned, my name is John Joe. I've been at Givery for about 2 years now. And, in my time here, at first I was working on the track test platform as, the sort of lead backend engineer over there. And, after around a year or so, after kind of building up that team, I moved over to form a new application infrastructure team, which we created to help build up a lot of the underlying platforms that track depends on, and support all of the products.
So that seems like a very hairy and difficult technical problem that you're solving. Can you explain a little bit about some of the technical problems that you get to solve as a part of as part of the application infrastructure team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, for example, one of the things that we do on the application infra team is manage the system that distributes our content, our challenges, to all of the different products. So, we need to make sure that this is distributing the products at, high throughput, low latency, with the ability to actually produce updates without causing any breaking changes for any of the other services. So it's really important to just understand how all of the products actually use your content, and if anyone's doing anything wrong. We added a lot of permission based restrictions recently, so ensuring that we could add those restrictions without preventing any of the customers from using access, or prevent them from losing access to content that they were using before.
Sure.
That sort of thing.
And as a senior software engineer here, what does your day-to-day look like?
So I think my day-to-day is pretty comfortable. I work from home most of the time, so I kind of wake up when I'm ready to wake up, clock into work, and then sort of just figure out what my objective for the day is. We usually have our system of just putting in our sign-in message where we'll put what we're going to work on, and a lot of my work is a bit more flexible, I think, than some of the other teams, because as our infrastructural team, there's kind of a wide range of things that we can work on. And so I'll figure out kind of what the highest priority ones are based off what our current missions are. And after I plan out kind of where I want to be by the end of the day, I'll work towards that process. We have our daily stand-up, but actually my meetings are generally really late, so I'm able to focus on these tasks and make sure that I'm getting a fair amount of contribution done.
Cool. Can you speak about the overall culture here at Givery? In your own words, what is it like here?
I think Givery is probably the nicest place I've worked, for sure. Everyone is very it's not just a matter of being pleasant in interactions. I think that's kind of the bare minimum that any company should have. But I think that there is just a very inherent kindness and understanding and empathy that all the members have. So, there's never been any situation I've been in where it's felt like I'm being blamed for anything. Sure. Even when problems arise, it's just focusing on solving the problem. And when people make mistakes, they're not berated for the mistakes. There's much more focus on just preventing the mistakes from occurring. Yeah. And so, I feel very comfortable to speak up about okay, this doesn't look like it's going to be released at the time we thought it was going to be released. And, the business is just okay. Or when I need to kind of change the requirements because the original requirements weren't necessarily what we needed, they've been super understanding in working with me to change those requirements, or contact the customers about, any related things there.
Oh.
So yeah, it's very nice.
Is there a specific aspect of Givery's culture that's important to you?
So I think one of the, at least, for me, every time I'm kind of working on my evaluation doc and looking through all of our principles and what I want to focus on myself, I think a big one of these is what we call unlearning. And, the idea is just we want to not just focus on what we've been doing that's been successful, but focus on just how we can change our systems to make improvements, right? Even if something's been working, it doesn't mean it will keep working. And you always have to keep questioning if the way you're doing something is the right way. And yeah, I found that there's been a lot of openness to changing our, internal structuring of things, or, pivoting on previous decisions of how permissions should work, or how we should, be managing our content, things like that. So, I really appreciate that openness and willingness to question what we've been doing and adapt to what we should be doing.
Yeah, I think to me it sounds like a super adaptable organization, and also an organization that I think values personal growth of their engineers, and even just of the system as a whole.
Yeah.
Is there some soft skills and technical skills that you've got to develop while working here at Givery?
Yeah, I think I've been able to develop a lot of leadership skills. Previously, in my former company experience, I was always just a member of a team. I was given work to do. I completed my tasks. That was, the general process. Sometimes I'd be maybe given a project to be in charge of, and, see that to the finish. But there was always just this air of other people would handle a lot of other things. This is my space, work within that space, do my job. But here, since coming to Givery, I've come to rethink a lot of my role as an engineer. And so I've kind of shifted more towards coming up with what the work should be, changing the business direction in anywhere that I think that it's not moving the right way, shifting priorities around where I think we could deliver value quickest, and building things that aren't necessarily being asked for but are technically feasible. I think there's a rare place of an engineer that they are the ones that actually understand the entire system, and they can actually make a lot of really crucial suggestions that the business isn't aware of because they don't understand how all the inner workings are. So I've tried to contribute a lot more on the business side.
Sure.
And determining what features we should be developing, how we should be developing them, and what these priorities are. So yeah, since going to Givery, I've really come to understand the I think the general product side and the product vision a lot more.
Sure. So when I hear you talk about your past role as, I guess what I would say maybe a passive IC might be the and then now you're actively improving the business, and you're coming up with the ideas to take the business in the direction that you think is best from your knowledge as an engineer.
Yeah.
I guess what is important for you to do this job well now that this is the new job of I guess actively thinking of the new ways to make the business better? Have you learned about I guess what skills you need to succeed as this kind of engineer that you are now? I guess this might be a very complex question.
Sorry, could you maybe rephrase the question?
Sure. I guess what skills do you need as somebody that's actively improving the business as opposed to an IC in your past role?
Okay. Yeah. I think the biggest skill is it's not just communication, but proactive communication. I think that's probably, yeah, by far the biggest thing that I've found I've needed to develop. It's not just speaking when spoken to, but speaking out, like whenever, any situation is noticed, and letting my opinion be heard.
Sure.
Even if I'm not like asked a question. And, I think that proactivity is something that you're not really like taught to do as an engineer a lot of times.
Sure.
The general focus of engineers is always just like get your tasks done by the end of the sprint, right?
Sure.
That's sort of like how you're taught to work originally. But, every time I've spoken out and suggested change and, mentioned that, hey, this doesn't work right, or like there's this like, major issue that we've been having that like no one's noticed up till now, or even just like we have this system, but it's not sustainable in the long term. I think we should like focus on fixing this instead of developing new features. Like that's always been really well like received by the company, and it's encouraged me to kind of like keep speaking out and keep like asserting my opinion on things. So yeah, I think I've been able to develop that like proactive communication a lot better.
Wow, that's awesome. Can you give me a sense of, I think, give and give as a value here at Givery? So I've talked to quite a few teammates here, and I think I have my own idea of what that give and give means, but I was wondering what you think of what that value is.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, the idea of give and give is just, it's giving to, the simple definition is, it's like giving to your customers, giving to your like, your teammates. I think also, there's kind of like, it's not stated, but giving to yourself too. Like, I think it's just really important to not focus on like selfish motivations, but what is best for everyone. Like,
Sure.
But I think like what's best for yourself can be kind of like included in that too.
Sure.
But, like you have to just think of removing like your immediate like wants from the situation, and more just like, if I think on, like my day-to-day process, and I think like, okay, like how should this feature be developed? And I can think that, okay, well, the easiest way to do it is just like this. And, that would get the thing done. No one would like notice there's a problem. But, instead of thinking that way, I think, okay, well, what are my options? What do these options mean for like the customers? Like, are they able to use the product better? What does this mean for my teammates? How is it going to be like working with this code base when I make these changes? And then also just like, how is it going to be for myself? Like, when I look back on what I've done, am I going to be proud of this work? Am I going to feel like good about what I've done here? And, just by trying to focus on those like less selfish motivations of just like trying to get the easiest thing done, and more on like what's best for the long term. Yeah, that's kind of like what give and give means to me, I would say.
So I imagine if this is the thought process that a lot of the engineers are going through, it actually is a wonderful place to work. If everybody is thinking about everyone else's, I guess, not needs, but like ease of working within, like, let's say, for example, a code base, right? What do you think contributes to this kind of like team dynamic at Givery?
I mean, I think just a really big part of it is like the management being very like pleasant to work with. When you have management that feels like everything's like top down, it's really hard to sort of like build up those natural, comfortable interactions.
Sure.
I think another part is just like in the hiring process, you can't focus on just hiring people that have like hard skills that you need. Sure. Like those personalities, those culture fits, that's really important. That's always like a part of our hiring process. So, we've managed to really like assemble a lot of people who have, similar core values and are willing to just kind of work in this environment where, everyone's like trying to do what's best for,
Sure.
each other.
Wow. I kind of wanted to switch gears here just a little bit.
Yeah.
To talk about the, I guess, international atmosphere that's on the engineering team.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are some Japanese teams as well because you have Japanese customers.
Yeah.
Can you speak about kind of the relationship between the Japanese teams and the English-speaking engineering teams?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so actually, I think probably I have been kind of one of those go-between people a lot. But, so I guess to, go into it a little more, like we do have definitely, the English-focused like engineering side more. Mm-hmm. And then, on the Japanese side, we have like all of the business, the CS, and then also several of the, engineers who have been here since like, the early days of the company, who built a lot of our core systems, and mostly work on our like platform side.
Sure.
So, with these different, language speaking people, it's really important that everyone is patient in communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been, something I've noticed a lot where like people will do their best to communicate to the other in, like easy to understand like English or Japanese. We use a lot of like internal translation tools. Mm-hmm. And then we also have members who are, bilingual to a degree. And, like so myself included, where we try to like be present in, some of these like meetings that will have like both parts. Mm-hmm. And, can act as like interpreters. Mm-hmm. And, I think what's been nice about this like environment is that, like so my Japanese, for example, is like very imperfect, but everyone's always very like appreciative of, like my, attempts to just like explain things in Japanese as much as possible. Mm-hmm. They've been willing to, like correct my mistakes, work, like wait through like my like words. And, I think we also try to do the same thing when, our Japanese speaking members try to communicate in English. And I think everyone's just very like pleasant in those interactions, which, makes it work a lot better. Mm-hmm. If people were just, cutting off each other or trying to like speak over people or not willing to wait for others to respond, then that wouldn't work very well. But
sure.
I found it works here quite well.
And in terms of the international atmosphere, just within just the engineering team,
mm-hmm.
What is the atmosphere like there?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fun because we have lots of, different countries represented. And, we like, I'll, tell various things about where we come from. Mm-hmm. Everyone has a different background. And, it's really fun just working with people from like so many different places who sure. all have like so many different experiences. Like all of our like stand-ups and stuff, we always just kind of like talk about, whatever's going on in our lives or like mm-hmm. whatever interests us for like a bit. And, I learn a lot about, what it's like living in like the Philippines or sure. England or South Africa. Like you just hear about all these experiences and it makes you feel like more understanding of just like the world as a whole.
Sure. So far today, I've spoken to somebody from the Philippines, from Indonesia, mm-hmm. South Africa, mm-hmm. and now in Seattle in the USA.
Well, originally Chicago, but yeah.
Sure. So just a little bit about, I guess, end-to-end ownership mm-hmm. in, I guess, engineering. I know a lot of developers like that. Mm-hmm. Do you have a lot of oversight or direct? Does your role need or have oversight or direction in mm-hmm. terms of doing your work?
So, I mean, I think I'm sometimes one of the people that's doing like the overseeing a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because I, even when I'm not like directly involved in projects, I still try to, attend like meetings in like some of the other products, look through like design reviews, sure. go to, like the feature request meetings where like the specs are being determined to make sure we're building the right thing. But, on my own side, the work I do, there's definitely like a lot of interaction with like the designers who are looking at it, saying if this UX makes sense mm-hmm. or if we need to like make changes to things to improve things. There's, QA, there's the business who will try out the product and be like, this isn't what we wanted. And then we, make adjustments there. Yeah. So I think everyone's kind of like, I think it's important for everyone really to be a reviewer in a way. Even if you're not involved in something, it's still like important to speak up if you don't think something makes sense.
So I guess hearing about the feature request meetings, the design review meetings, like if an engineer wanted to go to any of those meetings, I assume that they can, right?
Yeah.
So I guess like when you're trying to solve, I think like you said earlier, problems to the business, there's a bunch of different like places where they can influence the process, such as you said, the feature request meetings, the design review meetings, and I assume also in the application code as well.
Yeah.
Is there any other way that engineers can kind of help the business apart from just these meetings?
Yeah, I mean, like we, have ways of like, what I've done several times is like created my own feature request. We don't need all the feature requests to come just from the business. Sure. Like engineers can make them themselves. And, I've even I personally had worked in the code base, and with one of our permission related matters, I felt that the way we had our permissions didn't make any sense. So I just wrote out, a whole design going over how I thought every single interaction should be in a way that would be logical, consistent, and work across the code base. I proposed this to, the business to make these changes, got their approvals, and then, went about implementing it. So yeah, we definitely have channels for people to propose any sorts of technical or, even business side changes that they believe are best for, the customer.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Can you go a little bit further into getting the permissions feature done, I guess the rewrite done that you did? Were people in management receptive to your idea immediately, or could you go a little bit further into that process?
Yeah, I mean, so I think what's important is you can't just come up with if you want to actually get something done, you can't just have a vague idea of what needs to be done, because it's really hard to fit something like that into, your roadmap. Sure. And so, I spent, a bit of my own time just thinking about how everything should be and precisely what changes need to be done. So I could give a very strong estimate of exactly how long it would take and, demonstrate that we could fit this in within our process without any sort of disruptions to anything else. And, with that in place and with my own defenses of because everything I'm saying is best for the customer, right? Sure. And so as long as things are best for the customer, the business is always very open to, those sorts of ideas, as long as it's not going to prevent us from releasing other features or something that are also important for the customer. So, if you can fit within that balance, yeah, I found it's really easy to, get them on board.
Wow. I guess everybody that I've talked to today talks a lot about the customer focus.
Yeah.
And is there something that is this some value that's in the culture? Is it in the Kool-Aid somewhere, or what is the mechanism through which this kind of importance is upheld to the engineers? Or
yeah, I mean, so I think it's definitely one of the core values at at Givery about caring about the customer. And even for me personally, it's always been just one of the core values I've cared about. Sure. Even in previous positions. In terms of the mechanisms for ensuring that it's upheld, though, that I think Givery does well is one of the things we have are these win sessions, and we have these on a product level. So the track test, for example, will have a win session, and the people that attend the meeting aren't just the engineers. It's not just a demo or anything like that. We have the CS team there who talks about customers who they talk about the retention rate. If customers are leaving because they're unhappy with things, if customers say that they're happy with the fixes they have, talk about the marketing team and sales who are getting us new customers. And we hear about how the business team is like being affected by what we've done on the engineering side. And, like they will share customer testimonies with us. I've had like several situations where there was like a major bug that, I worked hard to fix the bug. But then after like there was really nice communication from the customer, like thanking us for that change that, they send to the CS team, the CS team directs to us. And yeah, there's just like this feedback loop that encourages us to care about, making things better for the customers, which, yeah, I really enjoy.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. As the last question,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, during your software developer career, what have you learned about what it means to be a better software engineer?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that as an engineer, if you want to be doing your best work, you should really care about the product that you're developing. I think that too many people go down the route of just wanting to pursue like a high salary, comfortable like Google or Amazon or, whatever position. And, I've been in those spots, and the work you do, you don't have any control over the product. You can just immediately get shifted to something that makes the company money that you don't care about, like ads, for example, right? Like ads, I think it's really hard to find people that are passionate about adding a bunch of ads to a platform.
Sure.
And if you don't care about what you're doing, it's really hard to do your best work on anything. And, it's just kind of like a negative cycle that makes it so that you're not caring about what you're working on, you're doing lower quality work, you're feeling worse about your role. And even though you're being well compensated, I don't think that's like enough to really like keep you happy. And instead, if you're working on a product that you care about and you're doing what you want to do, I found that really like leads to you doing better work and growing a lot more as a person and as an engineer. And I think that's really important.
Nothing to add. That was John Joe Friedmann from Givery. He is a senior software engineer. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.